when you have an opportunity to get out front, take it. Being visible, you never know who else is in the room. So they're seeing you up there and they're like, huh, and you may not even see them. You may not know they're in the back row somewhere. And that becomes someone you go to pitch your idea to years later. Recently, I had an idea for something, and one of my mentors mentioned, hey, why don't you write it down and send it out to people? So I did. I wrote it down, just a couple of pages. Here are my thoughts. I sent it to maybe about 6 or 7 people. Only one of them responded. And that person said, hey, I love your idea. Come join my team who's looking at something like that, just out of the blue. So now I'm involved with that team. I'm actually helping to support his activity, which was aligned to mine. But I didn't know until I reached out, right? A lot of ideas become fulfilled because you share it out. Someone else might have the same idea. Maybe they just never thought to write it down, or they never thought it was important enough to even mention. But then you find out, oh, this person has that same idea, and you start to connect, right? And all of a sudden, you don't just have one person, you maybe have 5 to 10, and then now you have a team. It's not just you. And any success I've had in my career has not just been me.
All right, y'all, welcome to the Next Gen Leaders Podcast, a show that's focused on millennials and Gen Zs, helping you build your skills, your mindset, and your confidence, because we need y'all to be the leaders of these wonderful industries like tech, finance, engineering, and we're here to support you to become all of those things. And we have some amazing guests lined up. And in fact, today's amazing guest is coming from the DMV area. He talked about how the work that he does isn't classified, and I wonder if he feels some type of way about that. But I'm gonna tell you that his bio sounds classified. His name is Kerron Duncan, a principal program manager at Northrop Grumman. He's an investor, a STEM mentor, and a Black Engineer of the Year award. Okay, he was the recipient of that, and he spent over 2 decades transforming power systems and radar technology and transforming teams by bringing strategy, people, and purpose together. So if you're watching this, go ahead and put your hands together because he can feel it energetically for our special guest today. Yeah.
What's up, Kerron? How's it going, man?
Hey, thank you. That was amazing. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Glad to be here with y'all and excited to talk about me and but talk about y'all, and maybe there's some gems here that the listeners can get as well.
Yeah. No, and I know there's been some slight updates to your title. I can't remember when it happened, but you're now like the senior director of next gen technology. Is that correct? At Northrop?
There's always change in the wind. So, I would just say director of technology,
Okay.
innovation. Those are the things that I'm usually leading and striving towards.
Great. Well, yeah, no, like Shahar mentioned, we're excited to talk to you. The title, the job title itself, like what does that mean exactly? Like, are you like actually getting into the nuts and bolts of all this latest and greatest technology at Northrop, or like what do you kind of do like on a high level in your job?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So for me, it's always about transformation, right? There's always, like I said, change in the wind, whether it's various things in industry, technology, you know, really across the environment. There's always change. So to me, when I think of next gen, I just think of my role, especially over the last, I would say 5 to 10 years. It's been about looking at the needs of our business, looking at the needs of our customer, looking at technologies we need to bring to bear and mature and incubate and making sure that we can execute, right? So it's all about pulling all of that together with an amazing team of professionals that have the right skills. So,
Okay, gotcha.
So in thinking about, I guess also before, we dive into some of the nitty gritty of that, we always like to kind of get that origin story, but to also bring us in the present moment so that we are, really in alignment here of all the things that you might be working on that might be on the calendar or on the horizon. What are you most excited about right now? Like what excites you?
yeah. So I think the most exciting thing right now is my wife and I, we have a book that we're writing that's about visualizing your professional career. We also have a business that we're starting to support mentoring, coaching, and just overall executive speaking and things like that. And I would say that has been, I would say, my passion, especially over the last, I would say, 6 months. We've been focused on really just pulling all our thoughts. Like she's a professional and technologist and program manager. I've had that experience as well, and together I think we form a dynamic couple. Just our thoughts and really, I would say, our backgrounds as well. Pulling from her background, my background, and then making sure that we can empower, I would say, the next generation of leaders and technologists, and as you stated, business leaders as well. So just getting all this like information and nuggets of wisdom that we received over the years and putting that together for others to get it as well has been really exciting for us. And we're so, I would say, not just excited, but I would say curious about how the book and just our presence will impact others. So really excited to see how that turns out.
Now it's interesting because you have technologist in your title, you know, even though it's not an official title. Now you're going to add author to your title. Now, did you always envision that? Because I heard through the grapevine that it was you wanted to be a scientist as a kid. So how does that all kind of come together now that you're adding author in that and the ways in which you want people to benefit from your insights?
Sure. I read a lot of books. So I would say at some point in my, I would say early on, I probably thought about being an author. But what ended up happening was I was an author of technical papers and things like that. So I did a lot of that. And then over some time, just started realizing, wouldn't it be great for me to write something like the books that I'm absorbing and reading and that I'm putting into practice? And also, I would say uniquely positioned for that because my experience has been different than the authors that I was reading, right? Black man in tech, going into rooms where I'm usually the only one that looks like me or have had my experience and background. So that I think puts me in a different position and also could maybe provide some experience and expertise for those who may find themselves in the same position as well.
Mm-hmm. And then in thinking about that, I'm sure today, hopefully, we're not going to be stealing too much stuff that you and your wife are planning on putting in the book and putting it here on the podcast. But as you reflect in writing that book, what's something about your leadership style that you feel like people misunderstand that maybe they'll get the understanding through the book? But just in general, what do you think people like misunderstand about your leadership style?
Yeah, I wouldn't say maybe they misunderstand it, but they may not understand the relevance of it immediately. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm very much about defining a vision and a strategy before you do anything. So I'm not going to jump into starting to execute just yet on a project or problem that we're trying to solve. I'm going to always ask, what problem are we trying to solve? And let's actually spend some time thinking about that. What's the strategy? How we're going to approach it? And it's really like a thought process. And then that leads into action. So in the book and really our approach is going to be much aligned to defining a strategy and understanding the vision before you do anything else, because that's really what's going to guide you. That's your North Star. So once you understand where it is and where you're trying to aspire towards, then I think you're set. Everything after that is all about action, accountability, milestones, but you're always gonna be looking at that star and saying, okay, that's what I'm trying to get to, right? Even when you're in the nitty gritty and things get hard and complicated, you could always look up and say, well, that's the star I'm going after, and keeps you focused.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. So let's kind of take it back a little bit, back to like your first origin of getting into leadership. I know from talking to you off camera, you had some very unique opportunities within Northrop. So I guess kind of tell us like that first story, that first chance or opportunity where you were able to kind of step into that leadership role, even if your job title didn't necessarily have manager or director in it.
Right. Yeah. So and you bring up a great point, right? So the idea of being a leader doesn't mean you're just a leader, like a people leader, or people are reporting to you or anything like that. Like you said, a manager. You could be a leader wherever you are. So I would say my first form of leadership was really understanding that I had certain skills and expertise that the customers I was working for really needed, and getting over maybe initially being a little timid or not realizing that I had something to contribute. But once I figured that out and I realized that I understood, to use your word, Shahara, identity. I understood my identity. I understood, really my qualities, what I can bring forth and bring to the table. And I really started stepping into that was when I had this idea for a specific form of innovation, something we were working on, but I had a different idea, a more creative idea of how to solve it. And I remember bringing that up to my leadership and saying, hey, this is my idea. This is what I think we should do. And at the time, there were other companies who were really interested in doing like crowdsource innovation, like Google. You were hearing all these stories about these, I see these new entrants in commercial technology that empowered their employees to actually, get funding and support their ideas and actually start to implement some of that. So this was, I would say the early forms of that at the company where I had this idea. There was a early set of crowdsourcing and crowdfunding type of mechanisms being started. And then after several years of submitting ideas, getting funded, actually working on ideas and seeing them be successful, I would say maybe about 5 years after that, I became the manager of that organization that was doing the crowdsourcing. So I was one of the early ones using the service and actually using that process for getting ideas out. And then I became the one that was actually helping others with their ideas and providing those funding as well. So it was just this, so this full circle experience of being the person, hey, I'm interested, I'm excited about ideas, to then saying, hey, who else has ideas? How can I help you? Right. So I would say my early I would say assessment of leadership. Again, I wasn't a manager, I wasn't anything like that, but I understood that this was something I needed to lead in.
Gotcha. No, I like that, and I think that initiative is something that's always important. Um, I know also from our previous conversation that you maybe had some opportunities where like you were able to gain some sponsors within the organization and they kind of helped you in your leadership, both maybe in career trajectory, but then also maybe giving you opportunities to kind of pitch your ideas to some of the people in leadership. Can you maybe tell us some stories about how gaining sponsorship has been impactful and how to maybe even go about gaining sponsors if you're trying to, build that relationship and that trust with your employer?
Right. So that first example I gave was just kind of the early, I would say, getting over imposter syndrome, realizing I
Yeah.
can do this. But later on, and I would say it's happened many times, and even today, I still do it, where I have a thought about what we should do. It's just maybe a different scale. Initially, it was my idea about a project I was working on or a piece of technology. Now it's I want to understand and help the business, the entire company, right? So it's just changed in scale. So getting into those, I would say those rooms or meeting with those potential sponsors really starts with building a relationship. They have to see your work and realize that you're providing, your focus on, providing performance, you're high performer, you're someone that others are seeing as a good person to work with, right? So you have a network of people that support you. And when I go in with my idea, is typically built on talking to other stakeholders. So when I go into that room, I'm saying, hey, I spoke to this person, I spoke to that person. It's a great idea. And let me propose it to you. So at this point in my career, I've done it in terms of reaching out to chief technology officers or even chief executive officer. Really, it doesn't matter at this point where they are in leadership. I'm going to pitch my idea, right? So I've had opportunities to see that happen. In particular, even recently, I had this idea of connecting. So we have within our organization lots of employee resource groups, right? These are typically catered to different communities. It could be Asian Pacific, or it could be African American, or it could be people with disabilities. It really doesn't matter, but everyone can join them, right? But when you look at it, it's really cross-cutting the entire company. It hits every organization, every function, from engineering to business management to HR. It doesn't matter. Everyone is in these organizations. So I was pitching this idea to a corporate executive, and I said, hey, wouldn't it be great for us to actually tap into those groups and leverage our platform for driving crowdsource innovation and connect them together? And so that way we get actually all the amazing creative ideas and novel ideas that may come from all 90,000 employees into this funnel so we can really see what people are thinking. And that way we can actually start to accelerate how we, not just develop like technology, but it could be change how we operate our business. It could be how we do, our workforce planning, or how we hire, or how we recruit. You don't really know what ideas can come from them unless you actually try to empower and tap into that collective wisdom of the company. So that idea was, it went really well. I pitched the idea, but and then after that, we actually got to go ahead to start that effort. So things like that started early on, right, with that first example I gave, and then over time, it built my confidence in myself to pitch an idea, get the sponsorship, and know how to do it, right? Because there's certain techniques you have to apply depending on who the leader is and what their goals are, and then make it make sense to them so that they become passionate about your project or your idea as well.
Okay.
I think we're gunning for the next question, but go ahead. I keep mine.
Yeah.
I think we about to ask the same thing. Okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of just dig a little bit deeper, like in terms of like actionable advice, like when reaching out to those executives and whatnot. Like, are we sending cold emails to people that we've never met in the organization? Are we like grabbing people like as soon as they step off the stage at like a all people meeting? Like, how are we going about like building those relationships, especially if it's one, two, three levels above like your manager?
And to add to that, give me time
That's
for
what I'm
that.
talking about, girl.
That's what I was going to ask. But we hear that all the time. Sponsorship, build relationships. Okay, so what does that really mean? And that's exactly what he was asking. So, like, what are those steps when you think about I'm going to now intentionally start to build relationships?
Sure. So I've done all of those, Andrew. I've done the cold emails. I've done every single one, and it really does depend on who the person is and what approach I would take. Right. I try to find out more about that person, even if I don't know them. I'll ask other leaders, other folks I do know in my network, and say, "Hey, I have this idea. I think I want to reach out to this person. What are your thoughts?" And if they know them well or they know them a little bit, they might say, "Hey, you might want to try this approach." Right. So I would say do a little bit of fact finding before you do that, so that way I think it will help grease the skids a little bit, so you can actually maybe have a successful conversation. But also I would keep in mind that not all ideas you pitch will reach the ear of the person you're trying to pitch it to. Be persistent, right? Be persistent. So this idea I just mentioned was something I presented years ago at a conference with people in the room. The same, actually, one of the same individuals I reached out to help sponsor the idea. I pitched the idea to them 3 years before that. It just was timing. It wasn't the right time. And I also didn't have a great relationship with that person at the time. I didn't know them well. They didn't know me well. So over time, I got to know them. But I kept that idea. I never lost it, right? Again, going back to that idea of having a North Star, right? My North Star was still there. No matter how long it was going to take, I was certain it was a great idea and something that the company should sponsor, right? So I would say be persistent. um, I would say try different methods. If one doesn't work, try another one, right? Just be persistent. It will turn out. I actually have another example recently. I had an idea for something, and one of my mentors mentioned, "Hey, why don't you write it down and send it out to people?" So I did. I wrote it down, just a couple of pages. Here are my thoughts. I sent it to maybe about 6 or 7 people. Only one of them responded. And that person said, "Hey, I love your idea. Come join my team who's looking at something like that." Just out of the blue. So now I'm involved with that team. I'm actually helping to support his activity, which was aligned to mine. But I didn't know until I reached out, right? So I sent it out to like 7 people, only one responded.
Mhm.
Again, got to be persistent. And also, even if it doesn't happen the first time, just continue to work on your idea. Maybe over time it gets better and better and better, right? So I would say that's really, I think, the main piece of it for me is that I'm really self assured. I've went through my career now, seeing things go well, things go not well, learn from those experiences that didn't go well, and then continue to just improve myself, improve how I approach things, my thought process, read books, right? Have experiences. Like all these things, I think, just come together so that you become so confident in yourself. Not saying you feel like you know it all, you can do it all, but just confident enough to know that if you have a great idea or you have a perspective on something, it's important that you get it out in the world somehow, some way. Just get it out of your head. Just get it
Mhm.
out there. And you never know what will happen once you get it out there. So
That's good.
So I'm So gonna I'm gonna hop a hop. little
Go
further
do
down
your
the thing
thing.
because I got an aha moment that I want to make sure that our listeners don't miss. And you were talking about almost how sharing your idea became even more scalable when you leveraged ERG groups.
yes.
And so in the space of, and this key word that we hear a lot about is visibility. So can you speak just briefly about leveraging ERG groups, leveraging other type of opportunities within the organization so that it supports the leader persona in a way, but also gives fuel to your ideas? Tell us more about how you can leverage that.
Yeah, so I'll approach it 2 different ways. The first is I truly believe that a lot of ideas become fulfilled because you share it out, right? And you get you never know, someone else might have the same idea. Maybe they just never thought to write it down, or they never thought it was important enough to even mention. But then you find out, oh, this person has that same idea, and you start to connect, right? And then all of a sudden, you don't just have one person, you maybe have 5 to 10 who are really interested in seeing this become reality. And then now you have a team. It's not just you. And any success I've had in my career has not just been me. It's always been a team, whether it was my parents, my family, my friends, my coworkers, my team. We always had to band together to make something work, right? So I think you start to form that. So that's the visibility piece. And I think ERGs or just any groups that you have within your organization, within your company, within your business, within your school, doesn't matter where you are, even church, there's always communities that you can tap into and help build something. If you want to start your own business, why not start talking about it at your church? You just never know who's in there with you that can help support you in some way, whether it's ideas or financial or just partnering, right? So I would say share and make sure that you're visible and to them, and then they become visible to you, right? So I think
Mhm.
that's one piece. The other piece, when it comes to visibility, is going up, going towards sponsorship now. So one of the key aspects of building sponsorship, which was I know one of your questions as well, is to be visible. You can be persistent, like we were talking about earlier, or you can just make sure that when you have an opportunity to get out front, you take it. At one point in our within the company, we had TED Talks, those small TED Talks we were doing as well. I know we were chatting about that before we started recording, but um, I just saw this opportunity to be on a stage in front of whatever 15 to 20 people, and I took it. And I said, "Hey, I have an idea. I just want to gain experience in being in front of people talking about something I want to do or something I like." And then kind of breaking through the barriers of being out front, being visible. You never know who else is in the room. So they're seeing you up there and they're like, huh, and you may not even see them. You may not know they're in the back row somewhere. And that becomes someone you go to pitch your idea to years later. So, yeah, so just make sure that you're being present, being visible in front of people whenever you get the chance. And if you're shy, you're, maybe, introvert, I understand that. My wife always says she's an introvert. However, she's always out there presenting and talking and all these things. It's just that she needs to kind of recharge when she's done with it. Me, on the other hand, I get energized from talking to people, right? So I just always want to go do more and more. But regardless, I think you got to remember that this isn't about being an extrovert or introvert or in between. This is about you being you and you making sure that you're visible to the world, right? That's why we're on this earth, to be visible and to be heard. So that's the other way. So I said visible in terms of reaching out to the network and building your base, and then visible in terms of just being out there to be present in the world so that others who may become sponsors can see you as well.
You out here being visible with your website, KerronDuncan.com. You speaking publicly, you mentoring, you consulting, right? Because I presume that you find that there's value in that. And if so, how is that? How can you extract that value and share it with some of our listeners so that they can start to consider what's the best and most responsible way for me to maybe grow my own personal brand that makes me a valuable or makes me more high potential for leaders like yourself who are building a team?
Absolutely. And you're right. I do a lot of hiring. I do a lot of interviewing, and I do search people online and see what their Instagram accounts are and all that stuff. I do absolutely, absolutely. Because that's going to show me a little bit about them, and it doesn't have to be anything that can turn me away necessarily from hiring that person or bringing that person in. I just want to understand a bit about how they work, and also, like you said, what's their brand externally? What does that look like? Because even and one of the things that I also feel as well is your external brand will become your internal brand. It's really hard to separate that. Really, really hard to. I mean, actually, and I don't think we really want you to separate it. So the main fact is, if you're interested in mentoring, you're interested in learning, you're interested in growing, more than likely we're going to see some of that in your external brand. But the main thing that I'm interested in is, are you interested in the work we do, like the mission? right? Because like I mentioned, things will get hard, things will get difficult. But if you've tied into the mission, you understand, and you're like connected to that and locked in, then those things will be okay. But yes, having a personal brand that reflects how you want people to see you, both professionally and personally, is extremely important.
And you've benefited from your own personal brand?
What do you
Okay.
mean, like in terms of
So
before?
yeah, so as you're kind of continuing to scale in leadership for yourself, or opening up new opportunities, you find that your personal brand supports what you're doing professionally.
Absolutely, it
Mhm.
absolutely does. Yeah. So both, again, there's certainly parallels. My external brand, presenting at conferences, mentoring, coaching, those things, those are skills and attributes that actually impact my internal performance and just how I do business, in my professional career. It absolutely does. They tie in directly, right? It may be different scope or different scale or maybe a different demographic, right? It may be, but it does the same compassion, the same willingness to teach and learn and grow. And mentoring it goes both ways, right? I'm mentoring people, but I'm learning at the same time. So those things, I do it externally, I do it internally, and they work great together.
Awesome.
Nice. I like it.
I just be getting a little passionate about the visibility aspect, especially, when you being Gen X and then us also millennials. I don't know so much if the Gen Z is feeling this, but we've been taught for so long that we got to put our head down and do the work. And I
Hmm.
always say, we ain't got time for just doing the work. You got to speak on behalf of your work too. And that is about how do you increase the visibility to leverage that for what you're trying to do strategically. So, when we get to talking about visibility, I get a little passionate about it, but I'm going to let
I
Andrew
feel
do
it.
his thing. I know he got questions
I
too.
feel it. Yeah, no, I got like a million questions. I think, one of the things that kind of stands out to me when I, listen to you talk and I look at your career is like the ownership and almost like that entrepreneurship like mindset that you've had where like you're really owning your career and you're looking for opportunities outside of, the job description that you technically have to fill. Like from talking to you, all these different opportunities where you're raising your hand up, these are things that you have to do on top of your day job that you're actually getting paid for. Um, and it was interesting because yesterday we were at a conference, and one of the things that kind of came up was the work life balance. And I know
Mm.
for millennials and Gen Zs, we kind of have a different perspective on like work life balance as opposed to Gen X baby boomers, where hey, it's like, hey, go to this company, and I feel like you still kind of have that mindset because you've been at Northrop for 20 years, and nowadays we don't really see that from the younger like generation. Not that we that young anymore, but
I
but
know,
you know what
right?
I mean. But but to that point, like I guess that entrepreneurship mindset and owning your own career and signing up for things, raising your hand, like are those things that you look for when you're hiring leaders or looking to hire a leader or promote a leader? And is that something that you feel like the Gen Z, the millennials, don't necessarily have that same mindset, or they need to adopt that mindset more?
Yeah, so I look at it as harmony. You have to have harmony between your professional career and your personal life. You got to have it no matter what happens is there are times where you may lean more on the professional piece because that's what's required in that moment or that season, but it is seasonal,
Yeah.
right? So don't do it forever. Always make sure that you're taking care of home, taking care of family, your own personal, goals that you're looking to get out of it as well, because the work will always be there, right? It'll always be there, and you don't want to get too locked in to that. But at the same time, if you focus too much on things outside of the work, you may be out of work. So you got to make sure that you find that harmony. That's really key. And like I said, always understanding that, or at least recognizing and paying attention if things are becoming out of sync, right? Because when that happens, you do have to do something about that. And there's been many times in my career where I had to step back and say, wait a minute, I'm doing this too long, or this is going too far, and it's impacting other really important things in my life. So I have to step back. So I went to my leaders many times and said, hey, this is too much. I need to offload that and I need to focus on then or focus on this. Or here are the things I'm working on. Can we start to do some prioritization? And what is my top 3 things that I really should be focused on right now that's important to you? Because as you're working for another leader, right, what's important to that person really should be the focus for you, because that's how your performance, will be assessed. So having those conversations is extremely critical. I've seen lots of people just take on, take on, take on, and never say no, or never say, can I do that later, or whatever the case is. Just continue to take on, especially for people who feel like they have something to prove, right? Where they're coming into a space where they're seeing others who are just accelerating, and they're like, oh, I got something to prove. Let me take on more work. That's not how it happens, right? Because the the impact that it may be happening on your personal goals will eventually start to impact your professional life. It always happens. So you might be thriving professionally, but then personal is going down. That will start to impact. That's why I call it a harmony, right? It's one system that support each other, and that's important.
That really hit home for me because like I remember growing up, and Shahar and you probably heard the same thing where you grew up in a black household, you got to work twice as hard to get half as far, and then when you walk in these room in a corporate setting and you're one of one, the only black engineer, the only black woman coach, keynote speaker. It's like you put that extra burden on yourself in terms of, okay, I got to do this and I got to do that and I got to do excel better than anybody else would do it. But then you think about, like you're saying, like the burden you're putting on yourself and that balance that you lose over time.
Here's what I just thought to myself is like, oh, you got to perform better, right? You got to prove yourself. I had a moment when you said that. It was like, but I am better. But I am, and the thing is many of you are underestimating how good you are because of that mentality that we've got to, be better. You probably already are better, and to relieve some of that stress, maybe it's good to say, you know what, I'm already better. I am better, right. And it's nothing that I have to do anything extra.
Absolutely. And the insight that you need to continue, like we all need to continue to take on is, are they recognizing that? Are they recognizing your performance? And if they're not, and you continue to spin your wheels, but they're still not, then you got to find yourself a different space, right? That's not the space for you.
Gotcha. I want to get into the case study about the. Do you want to ask something before that? No.
No,
Okay.
let's do the case study. If you got time, I'll ask another question.
All right, cool. So look, I was just trying to think of like some interesting, just kind of unique questions to kind of ask you, and like I do some recruiting, and I'm thinking about talent, and sometimes I look at talent. And I also think about like relationships, because relationships are so important in the workplace. It's not necessarily that you're dating in that sense, but you have to have a sense of trust. You have to have a sense of, culture fit, relatability, all those things. And I was just trying to get a sense of, okay, hey, how important are those soft skills or those core skills or those relationships that you've built over time versus, okay, hey, comparing that to somebody that's just purely a performer. And so what I was thinking about is, you probably seen like the street interviews where they're like, okay, hey, the girl's a 10, but she doesn't cook. What do you rate her? Or stuff like that.
Oh, dang.
But not truly in that sense. But what I wanted to ask you was, okay, hey, let's say you have a candidate, and let's say they're like a 7 and 5 is average. Let's say they're maybe like a 6 or a 7, where they're a little bit above average, but you have a clear pathway for how this person can perform better, how they can execute better, all those things, that roadmap, that plan, that development plan, where they can kind of get to a 9 over time. Culturally, they fit perfectly. Like, you trust them. Everybody loves them on the team. They're just missing that extra, to kind of get them at that level where you really want to see them perform. And they're applying for like a leadership role that you're managing.
You make that person sound pretty good.
I know.
I mean, so now
maybe
you
I should make them worse.
No, you got to work to make the other
worse.
person.
Okay. They're like just really average, I guess, performing. Average, like, you're like, hey, they show up late a little every once in a while, but performance is just not above and beyond. On the flip side, you got a candidate that's like, on paper, they don't work with you. It's a completely new hire, or bringing them in will be completely new to the organization, but check every box. You talking about MIT undergrad, Harvard masters, they got the MBA, published a lot of papers, they got patents, all that. The references check out good, You call a few people, hey, yeah, they're a good person, they, legit, whatever. But you do the interview and you're like unsure if they're gonna be a good culture fit, unsure if the team will really like be drawn to them. Maybe they're that truly introverted person that doesn't have all the social skills that you would look for and that the other candidate have. So maybe
Maybe from
complete
a different
opposite.
industry, or
Yeah,
maybe like someone coming from a different industry.
that as well. Yeah, so I guess like which candidate would you go for? Like on paper, one candidate is that 9.5, that 10. Like, yo, they got all the technical skill sets. They just don't have the social skills, and they're gonna be a leader. On the flip side, the person has all the social skills, but they're missing a little bit. Maybe they need some more certification, more development. In that situation, which one would you kind of lean towards?
Or so that it's specific to our listeners, is what differentiating factors do you value most when deciding between the two?
I like that. That's very spot on. I like that.
That. So I'll start first with, what do I want? What am I looking for now? That's the first thing I'm going to consider. Do I want someone who can merge with the team and blend with the team right now? Or am I looking for someone that I can see as an individual contributor to go off and work on something specific? Right. So it does start with my needs and what I'm looking for. So putting that to the side, just looking at their skills and I would say experiences and just what they bring to the table, it really comes to it really starts to become critical in the interview process, right? I'm looking for someone who can communicate extremely well, no matter what you've done at all these prestigious schools or what you've done, in the group as it is for that first example, the first person, they're already on the team. Tell me what you've done. Communicate with me. Let me hear what you have to say. I would more than likely lean on the person already in the group, and I'll tell you why. If that person has already built up at least a relationship with the team, yeah, maybe they're average, but that's something that we need to performance manage. Meaning, like, if there's someone who's not performing at the level we need them to perform, that's I look at that as my fault. I need to work on that, right? I need to work with that person to make sure, A, are they in the right place? Is this where they can thrive or somewhere else, right? That they may thrive, right? So working on that is going to be really critical. The person on the external side will coming in, I'm going to need to understand, are they aligned with our mission? As you mentioned, it could be a different industry. What led you here? Why do you want to be part of my team? Right? You need to sell me on that, right? And then in our conversations, I need to hear things like, I can learn very quickly. I can merge with a team. I can blend with a team. Even though I have all these accolades, that's not as important as what we need to do for your business or your team or your company. So I'm going to need to hear those things in the interview. It isn't about what they did before. That's fantastic. I need to understand what they can do as soon as they hit the ground. Because in the pace of the business I'm in, we can't wait around too much. We got to move very quickly. So you come in, you got to hit the ground running. I need to see an impact immediately. And this is just a broader message to anybody that might be listening. So we can't really afford to have people kind of start to learn, and then maybe later on they make an impact. Immediately, you have to make an impact. So I'm going to look for those type of differentiating factors between the two, especially for the person that's already there in the team, because they should already know our business. They should already know the challenges we have, so they should be able to make an impact. So if they can't explain that or communicate that in the interview, then I'm gonna probably say, I'm not sure if they're ready for that next step. And then maybe continue to work with them on performance, bring in a new person, and take a chance on them. Which I don't. I've done both in the past. I've kind of hired someone from internal, but I've also brought in someone from a completely different industry, and they've been amazing. So I've seen both happen as well.
It kind of tells me, if I'm preparing for an interview based off of this case study, I should also be considering that my competition isn't just the people that might be applying for the job, it's the people internally. So somewhere in the interview, I have to overcome the objections that you offered as to why you wouldn't, jump to, contestant number two. And then vice versa, if you are sitting within an organization and looking to move inside, you have to now communicate why basically hiring internally and why you exemplify the best internal choice versus an external choice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Internal usually have a step above the external because of those factors.
Mhm.
And the only time that isn't the case is when we're purposefully looking for someone external. Like we want a different approach than what we're currently doing, right? We've maybe put a challenge out there and no one has been able to reach the challenge. Okay, let's go external and see if we can find that person and then go from there.
Yeah.
Nice.
Before I guess we're getting ready to close out around this
If you want
time.
to sneak it in, sneak it in.
Well, no, I just got to make mention of at some point during this interview, I don't know if you got comfortable. I heard an accent. You from Trinidad. I forgot about that. And you. And so I bring that in too because, you know, when you think about your leadership, I call it leadership persona, right? Like it's you get all the performance metrics right, you do the job right, especially if you're an individual contributor looking to move into a leadership role. It becomes, not to say that your performance doesn't matter, but you also now have other variables that matter as well. And it's like who you are as a person. So being from Trinidad, of course, you know, I got visions of being in Trinidad for Carnival, you know, but I ain't got there yet. You know, how do you incorporate that? And how does kind of like your background, your culture leverage you as a leader?
Yeah, so as you said, I was born in Trinidad and Tobago and came to Baltimore when I was 11 years old. So been here a while. And yeah, I mean, I feel like the culture of Trinidad and Tobago is definitely in everything I do. It's hard to take it away. My experiences growing up were really important to me, and also my wife is from Trinidad, so we you know, so we have a lot of Trinidad and Tobago stuff just around us in terms of our food, our passions, the things we love. So it's everywhere in our home, and the way I display that in my career has been in a couple ways. The first is I always look at Trinidad as this place of color and creativity, right? You talked about Carnival, you know, about the costumes and mass and all the stuff that we do, right? So it's all these things that come from music, culture, you know, all the way back to African roots, right? But also a mixture of all the other cultures that live in Trinidad. So I always try to make sure that I display that in everything I do, whether it's just being vibrant in the way I present or articulate in the way that I want to explain situations or ideas. So I'm always trying to bring, I would say, more life into things than just standard corporate kind of in a box kind of thing. That's not me in any way. So that's one. And I think the other thing too is just what, you know, growing up in I would say in the Caribbean especially, you have a really strong understanding of your nationality and your culture. You know, something that, you know, at a point in time in African American culture was really missing. Like people were, you know, held back from learning about their culture and their roots. But in Trinidad, we celebrated, right? So when I came to America, I had that understanding of celebrating that. But my peers and friends and people around, they didn't understand that part of the roots, right? So that's something that I would say now, you know, going to HBCU, Morgan State, things like that, I have a better understanding of both the Black American experience and obviously the Caribbean experience, but then the overall diaspora because I've met lots of people from different countries in Africa as well. So, you know, I would say my presence at corporate or in my role is through my experience of all of that, but also how I engage with our ERGs, which I mentioned in the beginning. So I've been the chair of our Black ERG. I've participated over decades. So I would say that part of me can't go away. No matter what happens with ERGs or what happens with DEI, it doesn't even matter. I'm still going to be me. I'm still going to interact with the people. I'm still going to make sure that we have that community. So I would say those two things are the things that I bring to work every day. I can't stop
Yeah.
it.
You got the accent coming out all the way now. You really,
Right.
once
Like
you asked him that, he just let it out. He was
it made me,
like,
I don't know, it made me want to say big ups, but I don't think y'all say that, but it's like, you know, New Yorkers and they got everybody in New York. They be like big ups anyways.
yeah. Hey, I wanna, one last question. I'm gonna stop talking. I'm gonna hand over to
No,
Shahara.
I'm all done.
So I was looking when we were looking at your LinkedIn profile and like, you know, getting to know you and we discussed like your profile, your experience, all that. The one thing that kind of stood out to me, like for you to be at a director level that I felt like was missing, air quotes, was like the MBA. Like typically when I see engineers that have kind of ascended to director level or beyond, it's the engineering BS and then it's the MBA. But you just had purely a technical background. So I'm curious, just from a leadership perspective, like I would imagine that a lot of your leaders felt like, hey, you have a gap in terms of understanding finance and how things work from a financial standpoint. So I'm really curious, like, was that gap present? And if so, like, how did you fill that without having to go get an MBA, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars, all that good stuff?
Yeah, no, that's good. So the way I filled it is through paying attention to the business, right? So for sure, the MBA would have been amazing. I think it's still something that maybe I can still go do. You never know. So I think that would be an amazing piece to the puzzle for sure. But what I started doing, and this was early on, one of my mentors told me, pay attention to the earnings call, pay attention to the financials, see where the business is going. Because if you understand where the business is going, then you need to know how that impacts you. Because if the business is going left, with your career in the technology or whatever you're doing is going right, you're not going to keep going right for long, right? Then you need to go left, right? So paying attention to the business needs and the goals of the company has shaped my career. When I saw we were going into I started learning AI. When I see that we're going to cloud, I started to learn cloud. Now, you're not going to hear about cloud in the earnings call, but you're going to hear that we're trying to expand our business and we're trying to scale. To me, scale means cloud. It means advanced compute, right? So just being technical allowed me to see the technical dependencies on where the business needed to go. You get what I'm saying,
Yeah,
right? You
yeah.
see, look, this is going here, but I'm a technologist. What does that mean for me? What should I learn to make sure we can accelerate in that path? And to me, that's for any person coming out, whether you're in finance or doesn't matter. Where is the industry going? Where is the market going? Right? And then those factors need to impact where you go. I have some artifacts that I give to my mentees that show like the career path, and it's really simple. It shows the left, which is where they are, the right is where they need to go, and there's an arrow, and everyone kind of understands that. I gotta figure out what that arrow is so I can get to where I need to go, but I always show a lightning bolt coming into the arrow. That's disruption. So when disruption happens, it could be those factors. It could be where the business or the market has decided to go. What does that mean to you? You don't want to get disrupted. So my phrase is always disrupt before you're disrupted. You have to disrupt yourself,
I like
and
that.
then you're ready to go. So
Okay, that's good.
Disrupt before you're disrupted.
I like it.
I
That's a
like that.
bar.
Yeah, that's a bar.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. No, it's absolutely been a pleasure, just being able to extract the value. My hope is anybody that's listening, they were able to extract extremely practical and tactical things that they can possibly implement tomorrow after listening to this. And so we're here to help with their mindset. We're here to support building their skills and their confidence. So in closing, and thinking about kind of elevating, and this is just to the listeners, they're sitting out there saying, I'm trying to elevate my potential to grow as a leader. What's one specific maybe practice, tactic, something that they can implement, maybe even starting tomorrow, that begins to shape that additional potential as people are seeing them as leaders?
sure, real simple. Read, learn, and put it into practice. Real simple. And even if what you put into practice doesn't work, it's okay. Go read again, go learn, go put into practice. That has been the definition of my career. That's why I've been able to stay as long as I have at Northrop Grumman, because I've been able to do those things, and it's moved me into new roles of leadership and sponsorship and growth as a person. So that's, to me, that's what I always pay attention to. Are you willing to learn? And are you willing to grow? And you willing to put into practice? Then come join my team.
Well, then slide in his LinkedIn DMs and see if he accepted new applications because he said, come join my team. This is a journey that we're all going through. We're all constantly making progress. We all want to see success, sometimes immediately, but just understand that right here, right now, taking some of these tips, putting these into action, you are absolutely making progress. If you are making progress and you can say yes to that, then make sure you share this with people, subscribe.